Once said that every golfer should expect to hit bad shots, and he was right. Hitting bad shots is part of the game. Knowing how to recover from bad shots or how to scramble can help you shoot good scores on days when you need to get yourself out of trouble.
He is racist. That is what people are saying about Fuzzy Zoeller. And right now, in late April 2026, a documentary called Hidden Reality just blew the doors wide open on a scandal that never truly went away. His former caddy finally stepped forward and told the world what he saw from inside the ropes. And what he revealed changes everything you thought you knew about one of golf's most beloved characters. I am James, and this is Golf Relived. So here is the core question sitting right at the center of all of this. How does a man who spent decades being celebrated as the most lovable, laugh-out-loud entertainer in professional golf end up as a cautionary tale in a documentary about bias and bullying? How does the court jester of the PGA Tour become the villain of his own story? And why did his own caddy say he saw the whole collapse coming 30 years before it happened? If you are finding this story as gripping as we do, hit the hype feature and give this video some hype so more golf fans get to see it. Stories like this one deserve a wide audience. Now, before we go any further into the wreckage, we need to go back to the beginning. Because the collapse of Fuzzy Zoeller does not make sense unless you understand how high he climbed and how much people genuinely loved him. This was not a minor figure on the edges of the sport. This was a man who transformed the feel of professional golf. And that transformation was real. The joy he brought to the galleries was not manufactured. It was not a marketing trick cooked up in some boardroom. It was just him. And for a long time, the whole sport was better for it. But the same humor that built the brand also became a weapon, and weapons, eventually, go off. Frank Urban Fuzzy Zoeller Jr. arrived on the PGA Tour in 1973, and from day one, he stood out. The dominant energy on tour at that time was serious. Players like Tom Watson carried themselves with a kind of stoic grace. Lee Trevino used humor too, but his jokes were a shield, a defense mechanism to keep the pressure at bay. Fuzzy was different. He played fast, which was already unusual in a game that was slowing down with every passing year. He whistled between shots, not nervously, not as a habit he was trying to break. He whistled because he was genuinely enjoying himself out there, and the galleries felt it immediately. The everyman in the gallery looked at Fuzzy Zoeller and saw someone who made the game feel accessible. Not elite, not distant, not something that required a certain bloodline or a certain country club membership. Just golf. Fun, beautiful, human golf. That connection between Fuzzy and the fans was completely real. And by the late 1980s, it had turned into a serious business empire. He leveraged the fun guy image into major endorsements. He became the sport's most accessible star. He was described at the time as a democratizer of the modern era, which sounds like a strange word for a golfer, but it fits. He made the game feel like it belonged to everyone. And on the scorecard, he backed it all up. He won the Masters tournament on his debut appearance in 1979. Think about what that means. First time at Augusta, first time competing on that stage, and he wins. He walked on to the most hallowed ground in golf and walked off a champion. That is not luck. That is talent wrapped in nerve. Then came 1984, and the moment that would define his public image for years. The US Open at Winged Foot. He was in a playoff against Greg Norman, and as Norman stood over a putt on the 18th hole that Fuzzy thought might win it, Fuzzy pulled out a white towel and waved it in mock surrender from the fairway. The crowd lost their minds. It was funny. It was spontaneous. It was pure Fuzzy. And then Norman missed the putt. Fuzzy won the playoff. The white towel became an iconic image in golf history. Sportsmanship, levity, the jester at his absolute peak. 10 PGA Tour wins between 1979 and 1986. The Bob Jones Award for Sportsmanship in 1985. A net worth estimated at somewhere between $10 million and $12 million by 2025. By every measure, the persona was working. The Joker was also a winner. And in professional sports, that combination is almost impossible to beat. But there was someone watching all of this very closely, from just a few feet away. Someone who carried the bag, read the greens, managed the distances, and knew the man behind the smile better than almost anyone else on earth. His name was Casey Kerr, and in the 2026 documentary Hidden Reality, Casey Kerr finally told his story. Kerr described something that the galleries never saw, because what the galleries saw was the whistling, the towel, the laugh. What Kerr saw was the needle. And you need to understand what the needle actually is, because it is central to everything that follows. The needle is verbal sparring. It is the art of getting inside someone's head using words instead of a golf club. In locker rooms and clubhouses across America, it is common enough. Guys talk trash, they joke around, they poke at each other. But on the professional stage, in the middle of a major tournament with millions of dollars and legacies on the line, the needle carries real weight. It is a competitive tool, and Fuzzy Zoeller was the best in the business at using it. Kerr explained that the needle served 3 specific purposes in Fuzzy's hands. The first was rhythm disruption. Fuzzy would engage an opponent in lighthearted banter right before a crucial shot. Not aggressive trash talk, just cheerful, smiling, friendly conversation that broke the opponent's bubble of concentration at exactly the wrong moment. Smiled at them, said something funny, and watched them lose their focus. The second purpose was status reinforcement. The humor reminded younger players of where they stood in the hierarchy. It was a reminder wrapped in a joke, but the message underneath was clear. I have been here longer than you. I have won more than you. I belong here, and you are still figuring it out. Delivered with a grin, but felt like a weight. The third purpose was brand maintenance. The jester persona required constant feeding, keeping the cameras on him, keeping the galleries laughing, keeping the attention pointed in his direction, regardless of where his score stood that day. The needle kept the spotlight exactly where Fuzzy wanted it. Now, Kerr saw all of this. He understood it. He was part of the inner circle. But he also saw something that Fuzzy either could not see or refused to see. The world was changing. The room was getting bigger. The humor that worked in the insular, largely homogeneous world of professional golf in the 1970s and 80s was going to hit a wall as that world expanded. Kerr warned him. According to the 2026 testimony, he told Fuzzy directly that locker room talk was not going to be tolerated the same way forever. Microphones were everywhere now, that audiences were different, that the jokes that landed clean in a private room could explode in a public one. Fuzzy heard the warning, and Fuzzy did not listen. By the late 1990s, Fuzzy Zoeller had become a prisoner of his own persona. The jester could not stop being the jester. The brand demanded a performance at all times. And so, when the biggest moment in the history of modern professional golf arrived in April of 1997, Fuzzy Zoeller did what Fuzzy Zoeller always did, reached for a joke. The 1997 Masters Tournament is one of the most significant events in the history of professional sports, not just golf. Tiger Woods was 21 years old. He was playing in his first Masters as a professional, and he did not just win, he dismantled the field. He won by 12 strokes. 12. He set the all-time scoring record for the tournament. He was playing a different sport from the rest of the field that week. The galleries were different too. People who had never watched a round of golf in their lives were glued to their televisions. Young fans, diverse fans, people who finally saw someone on that course who looked like them competing at the very highest level. And the world understood immediately that golf had just changed forever. Demographics of the game were going to shift. The money was going to shift. The audience was going to shift. Everything was going to be different now. Fuzzy Zoeller was standing near the clubhouse on the final Sunday, drink in hand, with a CNN camera pointed at him, and he pitched a joke he had apparently been crafting while he watched Woods dominate the week. He referred to Tiger Woods as that little boy. And then he suggested that whoever was serving as champion next year, meaning Woods, should not put fried chicken or collard greens on the menu at the champions dinner. He delivered it with the same smile and the same finger snap that had made people love him for 2 decades. In his mind, he was just being Fuzzy. The same Fuzzy who had always gotten laughs. Same Fuzzy the room had always welcomed. He believed he was in a safe space, among people who got the joke. He was not. Microphone had democratized the audience. The room was now the entire world. April 13th, 1997 was when the remarks were made. April 20th was when they aired on CNN's Pro Golf Weekly. And then everything moved very fast. April 21st, Fuzzy issued a statement saying his remarks have been misconstrued. That word, misconstrued, became its own kind of problem, because the remarks were not misconstrued. They were heard exactly as they were delivered. Saying they were misconstrued was not an apology, it was a deflection, and people noticed the difference. April 22nd, Kmart terminated his sponsorship contract. Not delayed the decision, not scheduled a meeting, terminated. With clinical speed, as the documentary puts it. The weight of that termination cannot be overstated. Kmart was not just any sponsor. 6 years, Fuzzy Zoeller had been the face of Kmart's golf equipment and apparel line. He was the man in the ads telling people to go to Kmart and head for the golf course. He was woven into the brand. The contract was not even due to expire until December 1998. There was more than a year left on the deal, and they ended it anyway, immediately, with a public statement explaining that the comments were contrary to company policies, ensuring that words and deeds are without bias. That statement mattered because it was not vague. It was not apologetic about the decision. It was clear. Your words do not align with what we stand for. We are done. April 24th, Tiger Woods released a statement through his management company, IMG. He called the humor out of bounds. Short, precise, final. Once Kmart walked, the rest of the corporate room followed. The domino effect that Kerr had warned about arrived in a single week.
Primary sponsor exits, and every other sponsor watches and calculates the risk of staying. The math is simple. Nobody wanted to be associated with what had just happened. The jester had no stage left. The PGA Tour did not need to issue a formal sanction. The market handled it. That, in a strange way, made it worse for Fuzzy. There was no official punishment to point to, no governing body to blame, no process to argue against. The verdict came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sponsors, galleries, media, public opinion, all of it simultaneously said the same thing. What followed was decades of a man at war with his own shadow. Zoeller processed the fallout not as a personal failure of empathy, but as an injustice committed against him. He felt backstabbed by a media that had previously praised his edgy humor. He framed the entire collapse as a conspiracy of political correctness, a room that had changed the rules on him without warning and then punished him for not knowing. Framing, that perspective, defined his relationship with the sport for 30 years. Beloved joker to haunted relic. That is how the research describes the arc. Tier 1 national brand sponsorships before 1997. Tier 3 niche and self-owned ventures after. Ratings for his post-scandal projects lagged. Tournament appearances became fewer. Invitations dried up. The phone stopped ringing the way it once did. Fuzzy Zoeller went from being the man every sponsor wanted at their table to someone companies quietly steered away from. The generation of fans who came to golf through Tiger Woods never fully embraced the jester persona. They had grown up watching someone who looked like them transform the sport. They were not interested in the man who had dismissed that transformation with a punchline. The brand that was built on the idea of democratizing golf, of making it feel like it belonged to everyone, had been exposed as something narrower than that. The fun guy image, it turned out, had assumed a particular kind of audience, a particular kind of room. And once that room was forced open, once the walls of the old insular world came down and the outside poured in, the act did not hold up, and the audience had outgrown it. Then came late April 2026, and Hidden Reality arrived. The investigative documentary gave caddies and inner circle figures a platform that they had never been offered before. For the first time, the people who walked the fairways with these players, who heard everything, who saw everything, who were rarely asked what they thought, got the floor. And Casey Kerr used it. Confirmed what had long been suspected but never formally documented. The on-course environment during Zoeller's peak years was defined by humor that functioned as a mask for something harder underneath. Needle was not just playful competition, it was cynical gamesmanship. It used status and exclusion as tools. And it was directed not just at opponents on the scorecard, but at anyone who did not fit inside the particular world Fuzzy Zoeller understood as normal. The documentary made a point that reframed the entire 1997 incident. The moment near the clubhouse at Augusta was not a single bad joke from an otherwise stand-up person. It was the logical conclusion of a brand that had been built, from the very beginning, on exclusionary humor. The fun was always for some people more than others. And in 1997, with a CNN camera running and the whole world watching, that reality became impossible to ignore. Archive footage of Fuzzy Zoeller speaking shortly before his death in late 2025 was included in the documentary. He remained defiant to the end. His words, released publicly in 2026, were direct. He said he would do it again in a heartbeat. He said he was just being himself. The man who had been warned by his own caddy,
who had watched his empire collapse in a single week, who had spent 3 decades defending a punchline, was still not willing to question it. The conviction was total. And the numbers, as the documentary lays them out across 3 decades, told a completely different story. But here is what the story of Fuzzy Zoeller ultimately teaches us, and why it still matters in 2026. This is not just a story about one man's bad joke. It is a story about a sport learning to grow. Golf in the late 20th century was built inside a certain kind of room. The culture assumed a particular demographic, a particular type of humor, a particular set of rules about what was acceptable and what got a pass. The room felt permanent to the people inside it. But rooms are not permanent. They expand. New people come in. New voices matter. New standards emerge. And what felt normal inside the old room can look very different once the walls come down. The Caddies knew this was coming. Casey Kerr knew it. He told Fuzzy directly, "The world is changing. The audience is growing. What works in a private room does not work in a public one." And Fuzzy, prisoner of his own persona, could not adapt. The question that Hidden Reality leaves the viewer with is a quiet one, but it stays with you. If Fuzzy Zoeller had listened to the men who walked beside him, the caddies who carried his bag and saw everything, and if he had used the moment in 1997 not to deflect, but to genuinely reckon with what he had done, that is the real lesson here. Not just for golf, for anyone who has ever confused a loyal and forgiving audience with a permanent one. What do you think? If Zoeller had truly apologized back in 1997, would it have changed everything for him? Would the jester have been remembered differently? Drop your answer in the comments below. If you want more deep dives into the untold stories of professional golf, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss what we uncover next. See you back on the fairway.